So this is the ethics of Airbnb, um, my project for accounting ethics. I'm Brian Pham, and here we go. So we have to start with an introduction into the sharing industry and how Airbnb kind of is in this industry. Well, the sharing industry is an industry where sellers lend out their assets for others to use. Common firms in this industry is, well, Airbnb. Um, the hosts lend out their vacation homes for customers to rent out. Uber drivers basically use their cars as an asset to give other people rides. Amazon, people don't think Amazon is kind of in the sharing industry, but they are, because of Amazon Web Services, where they lent out their servers to other companies to use for their cloud. And then we also have DoorDash, which is kind of the same as Uber in a way, except they deliver more food and other products than delivering people from place to place. Firms in this industry use IT systems to host a platform where customers and suppliers can meet. In the case of Airbnb, their platform, which is most of the time, these platforms are kind of mobile. So these mobile platforms are places that customers and potential buyers will meet. And all these firms, because it's a relatively new industry, these firms all have kind of regulations coming to them by the government in one shape or another. So now we're going to go into the Airbnb story. Well, it's all started in 2007 under the name Air, Bed, and Breakfast. Founders Brian Chesky and Joe Bibia both graduated from college and were looking for a way to pay rent, because, rent in San Francisco is actually pretty expensive back then as well. And so what they decided to do was they had 3 extra air mattresses in their apartment in San Francisco, and they rented out for $80 each. Well, they found some buyers, and they came up with this idea that, this is actually a good idea to run with. So realizing this, they contacted their other college friend, Nathan Lecharski, and that's when Airbnb was created. Now, Airbnb has become a company that's worth billions of dollars with listings in 220 countries. And recently, they went public with an IPO. So let's talk about Airbnb's business model and how it makes its money. Well, hosts curate their homes for short-term rentals to be put onto Airbnb's platform. The host pays all the expenses to maintain this house and make sure it's ready for customers and visitors to visit. Visitors come onto Airbnb's platform to look for rental homes in areas that they want to rent out. So how does Airbnb make its money? Well, they charge a service fee for both ways. So when the visitor does the transaction, they get a service fee from them. And then when the host receives the money, they also get a service fee from them as well. And that's how Airbnb makes their money. So before we get into the ethics of Airbnb, let's talk about why I chose Airbnb. Every firm has a social responsibility to conduct business in an ethical manner. We look at Apple and we think to ourselves, is their Chinese business partners, are they conducting ethical business through their working conditions for their workers? And should Apple be doing something about that? We look at Amazon and we look at their social responsibility to their Amazon warehouse workers. Are their working conditions good? Should we be trying to improve that? And should Amazon be trying to improve that? So I kind of wanted to look at how Airbnb does this, and if there's any social issues that I find. So in my findings, I found 2 ethical issues that affected Airbnb. The first ethical issue is with Airbnb, in Airbnb areas where there's a prominent amount of vacation homes up for rent, housing prices have increased in those areas. And that's not exactly a good thing for the people living in that area or who want to live in that area. The second ethical issue that I found was that Airbnb contributed negatively to the social well-being of the area in terms of illegal dealings, which I'll talk about more in the slide, and then regulations from the government that Airbnb is not exactly following. So, with the first ethical issue about Airbnb is the housing market. So, what's the problem? Well, lately there's been a boom in the housing market. Um, Interest rates are low, so people are willing to take out loans and mortgages. And it's being found that millennials who historically have not really cared about owning a house or were priced out of owning a house are starting to have interest in buying houses. So, how does this affect Airbnb? Well, the hosts on Airbnb, they look for properties to buy to make into short-term rental homes so that they can post on Airbnb and make a profit. This is causing a shortage or even more of a shortage in the housing market. A study shows that in New York City, where Airbnb is pretty prominent, because Airbnb is in that area, rent has increased by $400. And even in the markets that are trying to limit Airbnb through zoning acts and through limiting the amount of days that you can list as a short-term rental home, Airbnbs in that area are still being listed illegally, and Airbnb is doing nothing to stop it. So what's the counterpoint? Well, should hotels have a monopoly on the hospitality industry? Like a lot of these firms in the sharing industry, they're kind of creating waves. They're breaking into these markets. And the hotel industry has long been established as kind of a monopoly in that area where, if you had a hotel, that's like the only place you could stay other than your friend's house or a relative's house or any acquaintance for that matter. So Airbnb has kind of rippled this market. And is it fair that, just because there's some negativity going on with Airbnb and the housing prices increasing and all that, is it fair that we should regulate them or we should stop it? Airbnb counters that, even though there's negatives in the price increases of the area and the shortage of housing, visitors that come into the area, they buy from local businesses. They try to support and grow that economy through that way. And is that a valid counterpoint? Also, it lowers the cost of traveling because these hotel businesses, they have to compete with Airbnb. They can't just look at them without trying to say, their prices are so low, so we're going to keep our prices high. So their prices are coming down a little bit. But is that enough to dissuade? Is that enough of a positive that from the negative that Airbnb is causing? So the second ethical issue that I found was the social well-being of the areas that Airbnbs are located in. So some of the problems I found is that Airbnbs are being used for illegal activities. These activities include sex trafficking, and forms of modern slavery, children being used to traffic drugs in the area. So what happens is that these illegal activities, they rent out an Airbnb, and then they kind of post that as their temporary base of operations. In the form of the modern slavery, girls that have been caught at an early age by these gangs and are forced into prostitution, well, they set them out. They set up an Airbnb as kind of a temporary prostitution house for them. And then for kids, they send kids to these Airbnbs to traffic drugs from one place to the other. Another problem I found was that neighborhoods are changing to the point where they aren't feeling local anymore. In Airbnbs, your neighbor could be a different person every week or every day even. And sometimes that brings negativity, as in sometimes the person has a huge party of people. There's going to be a little bit more littering possibly. There's going to be loud noises in the neighborhood. The whole local feeling of having a neighbor that you've seen for a long time is going away because of Airbnb. And then the last point is that the hotel industry pays lodging taxes. So these taxes, they help pay for city infrastructure, and they help pay for things that local governments want to do. And Airbnb, they don't 100% pay these taxes sometimes. It's being found that a large percentage of these taxes aren't being paid by Airbnb, and they're avoiding them. So is that really helping the economy or the people in the area in general, because they're being able to avoid these taxes? So the counterpoint: should Airbnb be held accountable for actions they can't control? These illegal dealings, this isn't something that Airbnb can control. If a person wants to do these illegal dealings, they can do it. They can rent out the house, and Airbnb may not know about it. But should they be held accountable anyway? And could they find a way to stop it? Same as the hosts, should they be held accountable for things that the people, the visitors, are doing? So what now? What should we do about Airbnb? And what happens next to these ethical dilemmas that exist? Well, in consequentialism, we look at the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. So we had to look at net Airbnb and think, is it a net positive or a net negative in the communities it resides in? Are the positive benefits of, the economy getting more things, visitors coming in, stimulating that economy, is that a benefit from the negatives that happened, as in the illegal dealings, the housing market increases? Is it benefiting those local communities in a positive way that would outweigh the negatives? We also have to look at it from this standpoint, where the social responsibility is on Airbnb. They should be the ones who try and do business as ethically as possible. So they have a responsibility in itself, or they should have the responsibility to correct itself in these negative areas, like maybe self-regulation, maybe only listing or regulating their hosts from only listing a certain amount of houses in a certain area. They gotta do these kind of regulations themselves. And if they're not willing to do that, then what's the next step? Well, the government has to step in. If all else fails, the government's job is to make sure that businesses are conducting and doing things in an ethical manner and making it so that there's a net positive in these communities. And so the government could step in and say, you got to pay these taxes. We're going to force you to pay these taxes. We're going to zone you in this area. You're going to have to make sure that you don't have illegal housings in other areas. And you're going to have to make sure that you follow the rules. And I think that might be what is going to come to for Airbnb. Thank you for listening to my presentation.